morning, everyone. I'm Charlie Fink, Forbes Tech columnist. It's November 6th, 2020. Welcome to This Week in XR podcast. My co-host, Ted Schilowitz, is on the line, along with my friend, Rori DuBoff, is head of strategy and innovation for Accenture. Welcome, Rori, and thanks for joining us on this very auspicious occasion.
Thank you. Happy Friday.
Happy Friday.
So who isn't glued to CNN?
It has been a shocking thing for me, Charlie. Like, you know, I would say I'm a avid TV watcher. I watch a lot of TV, but this is literally like a real life movie playing out in real time with all the twists and turns and the graphics and like, you know, I think I told my wife, I think I've seen more of John King in the last 4 days than I've seen in my wife. Like, there's definitely something going on here.
Look, I mean, there is no question that Donald Trump is a talented TV host. And if he chooses to stay in the arena after he is pried out of the White House, I am sure he will continue to provide the drunk uncle greatest hits of his administration and his odd positions with his followers, that 70 million of them, I don't even know what they want. I've learned nothing in the past 4 years.
I was making a very crude joke that I will be, I will not use all the verbalizations, but when this started 4 years ago and there was the grab him by the blank moment, I feel like today, 4 years later, America grabbed him by the blank and shook him really fucking hard. Sorry for that.
Yeah, I mean, he went down in Georgia and Arizona, and you know, that's right where he lives. It makes the map look very differently, right? It doesn't make us all look like we're clinging to the coasts.
Right. And now the more serious question is, how do we start the repair? How do we start to have valid conversations with people that have different political views than ours, that have different lifestyles than ours, that, you know, can we start to get back to logical discourse rather than completely illogical camping? And it will be really interesting to see if Biden...
Again, I wouldn't make this another false equivalence of can we get back. You have one party in the center, despite the best efforts of many of its members to pull it to the left. It is very much a centrist party. Absolutely. You have another party that's going far to the right and is controlled by its far right element and is huge. The only person who got punished for being a wingnut last night was Donald Trump. All the rest of them are still in the Senate. They grew their position in Congress. So this was a repudiation of him as a talk show host. It was not a repudiation of any of his positions or any of Mitch McConnell's extremism or obstructionism.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah.
So I think we're going to go back to, so we're rewinding to 2016. Instead of, the athletic young black guy, we've got the, old trundling, I've done this before, I've seen this movie before, I know everybody, there's not a person in Washington, D.C. who doesn't love me, come on, gang, let's just agree to something. Right. And, they're going to do to him what they did to Obama, which is to move the goalpost every time he gets ready to take his shot.
Yeah, I guess as an optimist, I just hope that, I have a lot of friends that have different political views, right? And different societal views. And I like to have real debate with them and discussion, as opposed to this polarized, like, no, you're completely wrong. You don't have a valid opinion.
But we're not even arguing about there's compromises to be had between these positions. You're not talking to regular Republicans. You're just talking to people who are like conservative Democrats or what Republicans used to be in the 70s.
Right. And I kind of want that to come back. I'm just hoping that maybe it comes back. Anyway.
Well, there was once upon a time where there were as I said, equivalence was appropriate. And each side had its fringes, but it's way out of balance now. And hopefully it's a step back. But let's get to tech. Rori, it's great to see you. It's so funny. I used to live in New York. We used to be together in the real all the frickin' time. I used to see you and Andrew everywhere I went. And I'm in quarantine in California, and you are in...
Now I'm in Connecticut, outside of New York for a little bit, yeah.
So how are you enjoying remote work?
You know, I love it. You know, I'm one of those people who's just as happy to be working on a computer, socializing virtually, connecting virtually, and you get really used to it. Eventually, I'm sure it'll be nice to return to normalcy, but it's also nice to be outside of the city and just explore nature again and appreciate.
What projects were you working on, and how are they continuing?
Like, you mean before the sort of COVID era started?
Yeah, like back in March, you know, you have a busy office
Yeah.
at Accenture Innovation. You guys are on the cutting edge of everything with Fortune
Yeah.
500 companies. So I'm curious just where you were in your process and how you all managed to go forward.
I think some of the projects were put on hold. I think it was interesting. Just about that time, there was this very big focus. A lot of companies were really interested in their innovation centers and their innovation hubs. And, you know, even Accenture is moving into this massive new space in Hudson Yards, and a lot of planning around what that space will look like. And then suddenly, like, all these physical spaces became kind of, you know, moot or just like on hold, right? So I think the planning, we were at that point where the physical and digital was becoming so interesting to discover in retail, and not that we won't go back there, but we definitely took like a huge turn to just virtual. So we moved everything to suddenly focusing on, with all the clients, like virtual events and virtual education and everything. I mean, it was funny, the first 2 or 3 months I realized, or even the first month when people were saying virtual, I got really excited. Wow, they're really embracing virtual reality. And then you realize they just mean like remote communications.
They mean Zoom.
Yeah, exactly.
What I'm curious about on the virtual event side, from your perspective, is the economic side. What I've noticed is that there are plenty of people willing to join virtual events. There are very few people willing to pay for them. There are very few people willing to, you know, like when we go to trade shows, we have hotel expenses, we have airplane expenses, and we have conference expenses, and we are happy to pay for them, or our companies are happy to pay for them. Now that it's just on our own to click and say accept and pay, are you starting to study that and see, you know, how we tackle that problem?
I think that's a huge challenge. A lot of the big conferences, from South by to Con to Mobile World Congress, CES, they're all trying to figure that out. Some of them better than others, but I think it's going to be a huge challenge because those were all based so much on in-person interaction. And I think, you know, most people, when you think about digital content and when it first came online and, you know, suddenly you could read the newspaper for free and it was like, wow, what's going to happen to newspapers? And then advertising came in and there's that subscription-based model, but there's still people who are like, I'm not like paying to read, you know, the Wall Street Journal. I'm just going to wait for it. So that's the same challenge we're going to have with conferences. I think there'll be changes and really premium content will be monetized, but it's going to, I don't know if all those big conferences will survive.
I agree with you about the ad model. I think it's going to become an ad supported business, that high-end conferences with a lot of interest will attract advertisers in the same way that they use it at YouTube as a vehicle, and all, you know, if you've got an audience, you can generate income via an ad model if you have a big enough audience. So I agree with you.
Yeah.
But 5 to 10 years from now, it'll change again because VR will have a role.
Right.
And VR is the only way you're going to replicate, you know, the kind of presence that you felt when you were at CES or Mobile World Congress, right? That was the extraordinary thing about it. And that created all these serendipitous situations and introductions that kind of, for me, CES kind of level set the whole year in that respect. But like I told
you and I do this a lot. So we have this sort of sense of the future because we socialize in VR. Like you and I played golf last week, right? We do this.
And it works. And it works.
Yeah.
And it's not perfect, but it works, and it's completely different than this kind of interaction, which is fine and good, and this absolutely works. But in a spatial environment, as we extrapolate, you know, 5, 6, 7 years and 4 or 5 full cycles of technology, how good these devices are going to get, there is absolutely going to be a business and a worldwide phenomenon of virtual conferences and virtual gatherings, no doubt.
And I think that's happening right in sports, right? The ability for sports, starting to be able to access remotely through virtual.
I think using VR, we will have extraordinary experiences as spectators. and also be able to experience it socially, which is also important. And often today, I don't experience it socially. I experience it by myself, cocooned in my house. So I have a strong desire not only to play golf with Ted, but to get together with Ted and other friends like you and, be able to experience something like that. So wouldn't it have been great if we were having these conversations about CNN while we were together at VR watching CNN? So those are not our habits yet. But I do think that that's going to change. Of course, we all do. Obviously, we are evangelists and, as Ted said, optimists. But let me bring up a tech topic that I really thought about a lot over the past week, which was the role of Facebook and Twitter in the election and what they did to moderate it. Lots has been written. There was a cover story on the Times yesterday about it. What do you think, Rori? Did it work? Was it good? How did they pull this off?
Yeah, I think that these companies are in such an interesting situation because on one hand, they're sort of trying to shepherd in this whole new reality we focus on, right? Virtual reality, new realities, all positive. But on the other hand, the criticism is our current reality, they're kind of not focusing enough on, right? In terms of, is that an accurate representation of reality? So I think those initiatives to try and clarify, it's going to get more and more complicated with deep fakes and digital media, but to help people realize where there's a line between truth and falsehood and, accuracy. And so the movement towards trying to do that, I think is a good thing. I think we're going to need more of it. And it's going to be such a debate, of course, is this censorship or not? And how do we, what is the scientific way you do this that feels objective? But to just completely ignore it and abandon it with all the think we have, that's not a solution either.
Yeah.
Ted, can you describe, I'm interested, want to get your views, but just describe for people who are listening in case they didn't know what Facebook and Twitter did over the past few days while the counting was going on to regulate people's behavior.
Yeah, that's what I was going to comment on. I actually think it's sort of fascinating to study this again from an optimistic view of people that are humans trying, right? Now, trying their best might be a stretch, but they are definitely, or at least parts of those employees that are working and parts of that management and even the executive level.
Well, these are smart, well-educated people who are trying to sincerely, help the country. And I was frankly surprised at how powerful and effective it was.
Yeah, and I think more than anything, they're wrestling with it. They have an awareness that they have a responsibility and that they can't just take this hands-off approach. Well, it's a platform and we take no responsibility for the content on it. I think they're learning their lesson and I think they're learning it hard. I'll tell you what was really striking to me the other day in our discussions about watching the broadcast stuff ad nauseum is when Trump went on and started talking, when he did that last sort of address from the White House and started talking about the voter inconsistency and what all the networks did, and you have to give them credit, all of the networks, NBC, CBS, NBC, and then their cable versions, MSNBC and CBS and CNN, they all, to a man, to a woman, all essentially cut away. They basically said, there is no evidence for this. It's clear there's no evidence for this, and therefore we're not going to allow it to live on our.
We're done with providing a platform for lunacy.
Yeah. And I think the social platforms, as babes in the woods compared to their brethren in the broadcast world that have lived for 80, 90 years, are learning from that model good behavior. That was good behavior on the side of the networks to say, you know what? No, you can't just have a voice here. If you're going to lie, we're not going to allow it to be heard. And I think Facebook and Twitter and others are learning from that. I think they're getting
the New York Times point of view, was that Facebook and Twitter succeeded in suppressing propaganda and fake news by turning off everything that is good about their service.
Exactly, and that's the wrestling. That's the challenge, right? The value of has a relative. Yeah, it's fascinating.
My wife has a relative that I can only describe as a internet troll, And of course, they go at it endlessly. And his complaints last night were that no one was seeing his posts, that he would make a post and be talking to a friend who's looking at his Facebook feed, and it's literally not there. So they sandboxed millions of trolls who were sitting there going, and in fact, their posts were just showing up on their own feed.
Right. Fascinating.
So that was kind of amazing. Well, that was a great introduction, guys. Let's get to the tech news this week, because some interesting stuff worth talking about, I think. One thing is, sort of some good news and some kind of interesting news. First, the good news, VRChat, 24,000 concurrent users. I mean, you've got to have about 24 million users to have 24,000 of them be simultaneous, unless it's a music event with a big star.
Right. I continue to be proud of VRChat. They're scrappy. They were a bunch of young kids living literally living in a trailer like Ready Player One a couple years ago. They're cool, they're fun, they're authentic, and seeing them succeed, especially against the forces, the big forces, and continue to garner an audience and continue to hold that viral, like the real deal audience is.
They're going to be a fat acquisition target for Oculus, no doubt. Rory, are you a fan of VRChat?
I've tried VRChat. It's been okay. I mean, it's a little bit like, I use Altspace more, I'll be honest, in terms of maybe the level. But what I love, to your point, is that you feel like, maybe a few years ago, there was this explosion in VR content creators and all this stuff coming out. And then some of them kind of had to shut down because of economics. But right now there's like an explosion in VR communities, like collaborative workspaces, chat rooms.
If you want free VR, that's where the free VR is.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So it's, I'll be interested to see what happened, but seeing that, I was like, oh, I should check it out. It's been a while since I've looked at that one. I should see where their platforms evolved.
There are lots of grown-ups predominantly listening to this, and I think everybody is thinking, yeah, VRChat, isn't that filled with 12-year-olds?
Yes.
And the answer is, yes, it is. Rec Room is just as bad.
Yeah.
However, those 12-year-olds will soon be 18-year-olds, yes, and they will be very, very valuable new consumers.
Yes.
Forming new habits. So I don't take it lightly, although at first I did, because I thought it was a place people went to try on a Winnie the Pooh avatar. But, when you give yourself over to it, trying on lots of avatars with your friends is actually fun.
Yeah, well,
even for grown-ups.
There's a reference to like bulletin boards in the 80s into the beginning of chat rooms in the 90s. And you're like, that's interesting, but that's not my kind of people. To then flash forward to today, and everybody is on some sort of social connectivity. Right? That started with these fringe groups, with these like crazy bulletin boards and like people posting weird things. And there was weird stuff going on back then. There's still weird stuff going on today, but it completely mainstreamed. And I think, Charlie, you and I believe, and I imagine, Laura, you believe as well, we're kind of at that weird, eerie time that's starting to find its trajectory into the mainstream. And it's, it's starting to look like it's going to be a mainstream thing, all these things, and as they evolve.
Good segue. PlayStation VR CEO Jim Ryan gave the Washington Post an interview that I thought was very revealing, and we've linked to it from the column this week. As everybody probably knows, PlayStation VR is the most popular consumer VR platform, and they continue to grow faster than Oculus. I think Sony is very good at supply chain and keeping products available, and they have 150 million, PS4 and PS5s out there that are all VR capable. Yet Ryan played down VR. He said 2021 is not VR's year. Yeah, VR is going to be important, but we're in the console game business. It was not exactly the kind of stirring Mark Zuckerberg video about immersive media.
Yeah, that's a classic innovator's dilemma thing, right? You have a very large company, and I'm a big fan of Sony, what they've done with the PS4 and evolving it to PS5 and building mass market. I'm not a tremendous fan of the PlayStation VR, and I think any hardcore enthusiast is not a tremendous fan of PlayStation VR. It's very limiting. It's very crude. The controllers don't work very well. It's just, and it's tethered. It's just not a great experience, right? But to Sony's credit, because of that, like, installed base, they have the numbers, right? Even though it's an inferior experience and an inferior product, they have the numbers. So I think what Sony is sort of doing and telegraphing is when we actually have something that could be validly to compete with real enthusiasts, we're going to come back and we're going to tell you what we're doing. Right now, all we need to do is sort of downplay it because we know that we don't have the real VR people. We just have people that bought the thing, that have used it a few times, and they kind of like, yeah, it's okay, but it's not great. Whereas people that own a Quest now are virally excited about their device, right? And they're using it, albeit smaller numbers, but much more important numbers. So I think
traffic and sales have spiked in the Oculus store with the introduction of the Quest 2. I think people are using VR more because the Quest 2 is better. There's excitement around a new product. And I think people are revisiting old things now with a high resolution headset where you can read things. So time is coming to an end, my friends. One last topic I want to bring up is Pokemon Go is about to take over Grand Theft Auto 5 as the most lucrative intellectual property enterprise of all time.
Amazing. Wow. Yeah.
And they're building more and more AR into it. I am not a Pokemon Go fan, but they have all over the world, these events that attract 50, 100,000 people to a park, and they geek out on Pokemon. So pretty amazing. The franchise still number 2 in the app stores. And it just continues to dominate mobile entertainment.
And you want to talk about the success of an ad-based model, right? They learned from Google how to monetize this thing and didn't charge people on the front end. And essentially, it became an ad platform. It became a place, that people would monetize via advertising, and extrapolate that to, like you said, now getting ready to topple Grand Theft Auto, which no one thought would ever be toppled as the largest revenue generating piece of, intellectual entertainment IP ever created. Now,
and the thing I love, of course, about Grand Theft Auto 5 is that it's a virtual world sandbox. It doesn't have its own economy. It doesn't have the right kinds of multiplayer, but it can, and it will.
The AR cloud that they're getting their users to help co-create with them, I think is a phenomenal, huge opportunity. And I also think when you go back to your comment about Sony and where they're at, and people buying, like Pokemon Go is so successful, obviously, because they're tapping into a phone, a device everybody already has, right? The challenge the VR market will always have is, will somebody buy a device just for VR alone? And that's why things like glasses and for a while phones are still going to be easier to sort of reach a mass market through, because they're multi-purpose. Eventually we'll see how they all come together, the devices, but yeah.
Yeah, and we're just in that immature state, right? Where in this next sort of 20 to 2025, Sony will have a valid offering that will be competitive and maybe better than Oculus, because they have more resources. They have ways to attack it better, and they're a more mature company.
Well, Oculus/Facebook needs a well-funded competitor.
Yes,
because right now they are building a closed environment, sort of with the business model that feels a lot like the Facebook platform, and it's freaking people out. Yeah. So there needs to be an alternative. By the way, people voluntarily enter the Facebook ecosystem, but you miss out on a lot of stuff today if you don't do it. Yeah. And I think that it's wrong for Oculus to do that. But from their point of view, you kind of understand it, because they want to integrate everything together so that it can't be broken apart. By the way, I don't think that that's negative from their point of view, from Facebook's point of view, but from looking at it from the outside, of course, well, maybe breaking them apart would be exactly what needs to be done in order to regulate it and in order to get control of the mind control that we all have willingly submitted to. So, one man, however altruistic, I don't think Mark Zuckerberg has any negative motives. But one man should not have that much power. That's crazy. And no one would have agreed to that up front, no matter how much social media has enhanced our lives. So anyway, great note to finish on, you guys. Rory, great to see you.
Yeah.
And we look forward to being with you again in the real. Ted, as always, see you in Pro Putt, and have a great weekend, everybody.
Okay, cheers. Bye.